who will now spend this hour with you in discussion. Welcome back here to this Orange County area.
Thank you very much.
So we spent already a whole hour in discussing various things, and we are now ready for your questions. Yes, Ken.
Yes, Ken.
Dr. Hora, I have two questions. One of them has to do with meditation, and the other has to do with one of the levels of maturity. The question about meditation has to do with the whole schema of these whole 8 levels of maturity. When that was developed, were you in a state of meditation when that came to you? Is that something that developed little by little as time passed?
Well, Ken, I don't remember the time when I was not in a state of meditation.
Oh. Okay.
One down.
I'll cross this one off my book. The other question has to do with the level of the religiously mature man, and that's what God does the religiously mature man worship? There was a statement, I guess, in the paper that said immature people have immature gods, and that is not the highest level of spiritual maturity. And so I would assume that the God is an immature God. Is that accurate? And what God is it?
Well, of course, it's safe to assume that the God of formal religions is not a mature God. It is an authority. It can be almost anything.
Punishment, reward.
Yes, a man is an inevitably, inherently religious creature. There is no such thing as life without God. There are no godless people. There are no godless human beings. There are just human beings who have invalid ideas about God. Everybody is worshiping. You know, even Khrushchev exclaimed while he was here something about God. Atheists are worshiping atheism. Communists are worshiping Marxism. Man is an inevitably, unavoidably religious creature, except that we define religion in terms of various institutionalized forms of worshiping. But you see, the whole world is praying with very little to show for. And that's the problem. That's why metapsychiatry studied greatly the existential validity of prayer. And we have come to understand that in order for prayer to be effective and have truly redemptive power, the God which we are worshiping must be an existentially valid God. And so we have transcended religion and went beyond it. And we have discovered the various aspects of God and man's place in the context of God. And consequently, we found that our prayers are truly effective. How are our prayers effective? They do not give us power to influence others, but they transform us. Our prayers transform our mode of being in the world. And that's effective prayer. Yes?
Dr. Hora, I have a question about, we have two teenagers at home. Right now we have a boy who's 16 who thinks he's 12, and we have a daughter who's 15 who thinks she's 20. The problem that we're having right now is that our daughter would like to stay out as late as she would like. And for instance, last night she went out and we told her to be home by 10 o'clock, or at least call us and let us know where she was at 10. Well, she didn't call until 11:30, and she wanted to stay out later. And anyway, we ended up just telling her that she had to come home, which she didn't like. I don't know right now exactly how to deal with that, which may be operational, but I would like clarification on it, or at least direction into what would be a good question to ask right now. Am I making myself clear?
Just what is the meaning of discipline? Like in say a parental discipline, I have a young niece, and she is rough and tumble and so forth, and loves to play and wrestle and so forth. And sometimes I feel the need to tell her, oh, please, leave me alone or something like that. Or I might see her, hurting a book or something like that, and just, being irresponsible. And so in a loving way, how do you meet the two issues?
Danny, is this a good question for you?
Well, I would like to know if discipline is valid, if discipline is needed. Do we need to set guidelines for our children? Thank you.
No coaching in the audience.
I needed that.
Yeah, it is very helpful. Thank you very much for your question. It is very important to understand the difference between discipline and control. Most people assume that that's the same, they are synonymous. Who could explain the difference between discipline and control? Roberta?
I think control is operational, one power over another. And discipline is love. It is seeing the spiritual capacity in the other and recognizing that they are capable of demonstrating spiritual capacity. My son, for example, said, I'm not going to do the dishes. And he gave me lots of excuses why he shouldn't do the dishes. And I recognized he's not a helpless boy at all. He's capable of doing that. And I said, no, the dishes need to be done, and you are doing the dishes. And that was love. That wasn't control, because it was his job, actually.
Did he do it?
Oh, yes. There was he did it very easily. There was no problem. And I don't... So I think the discipline is existential. It's done for love when you see the living soul or the spiritual qualities in the other.
Would you like to see something?
Somebody thought Tommy might have something to say.
Okay, Tommy, explain it.
He has nothing to say.
Well, I might just comment that I think that the horror of parenthood is the belief that I have to do something with the clear evidence that I can't do it. That is, if our children demonstrate to us that we cannot operate upon life, because if that becomes the issue, how do I make them do this or that? They have the power. We can't make anybody do anything. And so if you find yourself desperate, frantic, probably the question you're asking is the operational question. What do I do? How do I make them do what I want them to do? It's best if you recognize right away that you can't. You can't make them do anything. And then perhaps your attention can be directed to the valid question is, which is what really is. That is, obviously I must be seeing the situation in interpersonal operational terms. Let me step back a minute and try to see what the real situation is and what the existential issues are. And just giving up on the wrong question is already a big relief and release of the situation, and then inspired ideas can come into play.
It's also very helpful to consider the word discipline. What is the derivation of this word? Yes, yes, it comes from discipleship. And discipleship means the love of certain teachings. And if our children love what we are teaching them about life, then there will be no need for control. Now, how can one teach a child or anyone else without influencing them or tyrannizing them? Yeah, Michael, you wanted?
No, it's a good question.
Yes, Vern?
We had the same issue. We also have teenage girls. Special issue for teenage girls. And the issue for us, we found, was that when the children are younger, we can participate as a family, and it seems that they go along and they like and enjoy the participation of the family and the parents. And when the idea of adolescence enters, they're very interested in belonging to a group of friends that are outside our influence and have many different values. And it seems like the issue really is having great assurance that intelligent spiritual values are really the need of that child, even though the appearance is the desire for excitement and friends and belonging and all this other stuff, that their head swings many different ways. And we have to give up our desire to be liked or even understood by the child and allow them to dislike, or they try and intimidate. They say, you treat me like a baby. All my friends can stay out till 11 and I have to be in at 10. They go on, but it only takes a very short time for them to see that it isn't the parent that is putting down this rule, but intelligence. And it's that the whole family lives by the spiritually intelligent values and ideas, and we all adhere, and it isn't our control over them, but life's intelligence that we are learning, and they are part of that too. And they see it as a great gift after a year or so. It does. They do. They actually do. And they even make comments to such. We've had our 17-year-old say, you know, Mom, everyone has to come home early from the show to drop me off. And they get to stay out even a half hour. And it seems like a niggling thing, but she's in before 11:30 or midnight, and they stay out longer. And she says, but you know, there's nothing to do then anyway.
Yes.
She said, we really do what we need to do in that period of time. And she's even glad to come in and get the extra rest and be in the home.
One desperate mother asked somebody, how do you bring up a teenager? And the answer was, you don't bring up a teenager, you just endure it for a while. And shortly, sooner or later, they suddenly turn into people. But another concept is very good to understand, the difference between influencing and being influential. Who can explain it? Larry? What's the difference between influencing and being influential?
When we are When we are influencing, we are attempting to impose our will and our ideas upon another individual.
Right.
And when we are influential, the ideas that are manifested in our being just kind of shine forth, and they are so obviously of value that people begin accepting them or looking toward them or looking to them for guidance in some form.
Very good. Thank you. Somebody? Yes?
Joe. You mentioned that the Bible documents the evolution of consciousness, not the evolution of God, and there seems to be striking parallels between the cognitive development of the child from early stages to formal thought. Do you see that existential and spiritual cognition, consciousness, is simply a natural unfolding as the child unfolds naturally from one stage of cognition to another? And that this will be as much an everyday form of consciousness as thinking in theoretical terms is for the normal standard population?
Would you like to answer that?
No, go ahead.
Unfortunately, there is nothing natural about human existence. Man is not natural. If you allow somebody to grow up naturally and you wait without giving them a chance to be exposed to valid values, they will get stuck in some form of ignorance and suffer the consequences. When Jesus said, "I am come that ye may have life and have it more abundantly," he was pointing towards the fact that he came into this world to present the world with a valid idea about God, which then in turn will make it possible for man to be healthy and to prosper harmoniously, living intelligently. So metapsychiatry is also a science which helps people to learn how to live more intelligently and more harmoniously in a world which is actually very chaotic and full of ignorance and suffering.
Pointed out that there are less mature notions of God, less mature understandings of God that are documented, say in the Cain and Abel story, for instance,
yeah.
and that that an evolutionary process of consciousness is in process, and that. And my question is, does this thing, can it occur as naturally and unfolding as it does with the normal cognitive development of a child, or is it something that we facilitate through our prayer, study, and so forth?
Apparently, nobody grows up naturally to be wise and to understand reality. The human race has been blessed for thousands of years with uniquely gifted spiritual seers, both in the Orient and in the West. And these individuals can be understood as facilitators of the evolutionary process. And without them, it's not knowing where we would be today, perhaps still in the dark ages somewhere. So always, by the grace of God, from time to time, certain exceptionally gifted individuals appeared on the scene, and they were pointing the way for the rest of us. And that's how the evolutionary process seems to be proceeding. Without these teachers, there wouldn't be much progress.
It's interesting to note that at least the Buddha and Jesus already in childhood manifested an extraordinary interest in spiritual issues. That is, they didn't seem to have to start out and grow through the way most of us do.
But nevertheless, their unfoldment into enlightened consciousness didn't just happen. They had to go through individually a great many experiences and struggles and studying. And they themselves were exposed to other advanced individuals who had certain consciousness. And so there is this process of being guided, which we can be very grateful for. Yes?
In the 8 steps of God,
Maturation.
we have maturation. At what point do we spell God with a small g, and at what point with a capital G, or do we use either one all the way through those steps?
Well, that's a grammatical question, is it not?
Well, I get the feeling that between step 7 and 8, we suddenly step to a capital G.
Yes.
And I wondered if that was what you intended.
Yes, right. The closer we think we are to the valid concept of God, the sooner we indicate this with a capital G.
Well, when they are invalid, we can spell them with a small g, because the 6 o'clock news can be small G-O-D.
Sure.
But it's only our understanding. He remains the same through all your steps. Am I correct? Do I understand you clearly?
Who is he?
God.
Oh.
Do I understand that God remains the same during all the steps, but that we are spelling it with a small g until we get to step 7?
Yeah, somebody said, I saw God last night and she was black. Well, of course, one point is that we spell the one God, capital G, as long as there are more than one God. And then they are just gods, you see. The serpent whispered into Adam's ear, "You shall be as gods." Serpent didn't say, "You will be like God." "You shall be as gods," which means polytheism. When there are many gods, we spell them with small g's. The one God, the monotheistic idea of God, has traditionally been spelled with a capital G.
Then step 7 is a capital G
Yes.
in your mind
Sure.
also.
Sure.
Thank you.
Michael?
Earlier, we got into the discussion about the ascension, and it suddenly occurred to me that Jesus disappeared. So I've been looking at the ascension as a physical event. Will you clarify the concept of the ascension in consciousness? What, Jan? Would you repeat? Would you repeat what you said earlier? That it's happening now. It's not something that's a future event.
That's a good question. Just as it is.
Well, Anne is going to give a course on our ascension. Maybe Anne could help us, please.
It seems that ascension, as Jan had mentioned, is everything is an issue of consciousness. And ascension has to do with a process of rising out of the sea of mental garbage or certain perceptions of reality. And I think the one key issue in ascension is realizing that we don't in some way have to make something happen to the sea of mental garbage. We don't have to work on it, fix it, get it. We don't have to engage with it and conquer it in some way. We have to lose interest in it so that consciousness simply rises out of it and no longer is involved with it. And the hook point that keeps most people mentally involved with garbage issues is the desire to do something too, rather than simply transcend or see that it's nothing.
Sometimes people ask about watching television, whether in a student of metapsychiatry, whether it's all right to watch television. So we say you can watch television as long as you're not interested in it. And so we watch the sea of mental garbage. We live in this world, but we are not of it. We are not really interested, but we go through the motions of being human. But that's nothing really. Our interest lies on higher levels of consciousness.
Dr. Hora?
Yes. Yes.
In group, we had talked about, it just dawned on me that being here for God does not seem to be an interest in changing the world. That doesn't seem, I lost my train of thought.
On the freeway.
We had talked in group that being here for God was not an interest in changing the world or changing something in the world to make a better world or to look. Is that what you mean by transcending?
Right.
You're no longer interested in. I guess for the first time, what I'm saying is that I realize that I'm here for God and that what's going on around me is not important.
Well, it is important that your presence in the world be a beneficial one by manifesting qualities of God. And so wherever you go, even the dead trees would come to life.
But you can't say my purpose in life is to manifest God so the world around me will be a better place.
Well, it's not really a purposeful thing. It is just, as the Bible calls it, signs following. When you are here for God, you'll prosper and live harmoniously, and everything around you sort of improves by itself.
So being here for God is not a purpose, it's just an is.
Yes,
it is. It's
right.
It's not a cause.
Right.
Nice. Thank you.
Could we say that our first purpose is to manifest God so that God be glorified?
Yes.
It is basically our first purpose is to give God the joy of manifesting Himself.
One of the great tragedies of the history of Christianity was the erroneous assumption that the Christians have to go out and convert the world and force people to become Christians and believers, and it became a political and powerful movement and tyrannizing people who were not interested in these things. And then many missionaries, you know what happened to them. The operational idea is polluting the consciousness and leads into conflict and power struggles and tyranny of all sorts. It's evangelizing and proselytizing and influencing people is a form of wholesale trespassing against others. And it has bitter fruits. It's very bad consequences. So metapsychiatry is very careful in explaining the difference between influencing and being influential. It must be understood very clearly.
So the idea essentially is being in the world but not for the world.
We are in the world for God, but in an existential way, not in an operational way.
Could we also say then God made us for Him, not for the world?
Right, that's right.
And that gives quite a different direction on our
Sure.
mode of being.
Yes, right.
It takes away all evangelizing.
That's right, sure.